sports fans? It's the professor coming to you today to provide a quick update on the state of baseball within the state, as well as a not quite end of spring training, but Cubs update as we go into the last week of spring training. As always, brought to you by Game Day Bloomington Men's Health, focusing on all your testosterone, sexual performance, weight loss, fatigue needs. So let's start off with Indiana baseball. Indiana baseball this week, surprisingly, takes the series from Minnesota 2-1. They dropped the final game on Sunday. That moves them to a record overall of 10-13 and 3-6 within the conference. Indiana has the ability, if we win, continue to win some series in conference, to get that overall record above 500 and get overall above in the conference, which could make them eligible for postseason play. So going to continue to watch that. Hoosiers continue to win the best during their midweek games. I don't know why. I don't know how they're more prepared for the midweek games and the midweek matchups, and the pitching just seems to be a lot better on those midweek games. But they continue to take those down, which adds to their overall win column for them. But we continue to struggle with the conference and in conference. And it's kind of ironic. We'll talk ISU baseball, but when ISU, who at the moment is struggling in the Valley, has a better Big Ten conference record than Indiana in the Big Ten, that's going to be an issue for you. So we'll move on to ISU. ISU takes 2 of 3 from Bradley, so they're in conference this weekend, taking 2 of 3, moving them to a overall record tied with Indiana of 10-13. They win the series 2-1. The big story out of the weekend is Ty Brooks for Indiana State continues to look dominant. He's definitely the ace of their staff. He was a preseason Player of the Year candidate and watch, and a candidate for the D1 best pitcher of the league, and so he continues to show really good and the really good pitching and the ability to get deep into games, which helps ISU. ISU has no issue scoring runs. That's what's kind of ironic is the game that they lost. I mean, they still put up like 8 runs during the game. It's just a matter of the Indiana State pitching, not necessarily the starters, but some of the middle relief guys, and then just the inability on defense to hold some of those runners on base and then not produce any errors. Errors of note: Indiana has gotten a little better in the last series this weekend against Minnesota, and then the one game that they had during midweek. Averaging down under 2 errors per game now, which is definitely one of the things that they had to continue to improve if they were going to look to make any kind of impact this season. So that's a good thing to see. But Indiana State still flirting with 500 both in their conference and in their overall record. UE, unfortunately, UE is such an interesting baseball study for this season. Their overall record is terrible. They're 5-18, I believe, at this point. But they continue to have these wins that make them look like they're just unstoppable. And so they're not doing well in the conference. They've only got 7 wins on the season so far. But they, like ISU this week. ISU plays Illinois, so a Big Ten school. And beats Illinois on the road. Evansville keeps having wins like that just come out of nowhere, where they're beating ranked opponents, they're beating non-conference opponents that are at the top of their conference, but then just continue to struggle against conference opponents. So this week they drop 2 of 3 against California Baptist, non-conference, and take a loss against Southeast Missouri, also non-conference. But just kind of crazy how UE continues to have those wins, and their overall record is just not going to let them hang around for any type of postseason play at this point. But they're just dangerous. Like they'll play a team that should absolutely throttle them and somehow come away with a victory. It's usually probably because of the pitching matchups. They do have a pretty stellar ace and some really decent position players on that team this year. But and the coach is very, very capable coach there at UE. But just kind of an interesting study on them. It's very weird. Speaking for other schools, Purdue takes two out of three moving up, so they're at 13 and 7. So overall on the season, so of the records for D1 in the state, they're overall the best still and hanging tough. And USI continues just to be absolutely miserable and no impact, which is kind of sad because they had a pretty decent ball club going 2.5, 3 seasons back. But then, as I've said before, a majority of that team came with the coach up to ISU, who's now the ISU coach. Right now, the story continues to be, though, for D1 sports. Indiana softball sitting at 24-6, so they did drop one game, but they take the overall series. And they moved to 6-2 in conference. So winning record in conference, huge winning record overall. They're going to be looking for some postseason action. They take on ranked conference opponent Oregon this week. Oregon coming in at ranked number 15, and it's going to be at Oregon. So that's going to be a real test for them. So we'll see what ends up coming out of that. But they've shown their mettle against ranked teams before. They were non-conference ranked teams earlier this season, but they definitely have the capability to do it. And sitting with a 6-2 overall record this season within conference places them in a good, healthy spot that they'll still be above 500, even if they were to get swept, which I just don't see happening. I definitely see them being able to take 2 out of 3 on this road trip, even against a ranked opponent, just because they're that good. And it's kind of surprising that they haven't been ranked yet by D1 sports. So that's kind of interesting with that overall record and that winning record in conference, and that they haven't been looked at yet for a ranking opportunity. All right, we're going to transition over to the Cubs at this point. Got a pretty healthy amount of some stats to throw to you, as well as some overall news. So when we look at the overall news, we're getting to the end of spring training. World Baseball Classic is done. And how is all this going to affect the Cubs? Well, we're starting to cut the roster. We've cut the 44 down to 41. We got to get to 26 before the beginning of the season. And, the Cubs continue to lose games in spring training. As I've said before, definitely not, Council's definitely not going after, winning the Cactus League, but sometimes it can be indicative, especially when you start peeling into the numbers. I'll get into that in a minute, but of note, the Cubs drop last 3 games, 1 to the Reds, 6-8, and 1 to the A's, which was kind of brutal, 6-2. Cubs have moved officially Murray, Jefferson Rojas, and Bingham down to AAA. So Jefferson Rojas was the only real good news story for the Cubs. He had come in overall at the number 4 Cubs prospect on the team, and that placed him somewhere in the top 100, but somewhere in the 70s to 80s as the Cubs number 4. But he's definitely moved up to the Cubs number 1 prospect at AAA at this point. He had an overall batting average of .353. He's playing shortstop very well defensively with the glove. The Cubs overall regular lineup is just so heavy up the middle with very seasoned players that there was just no way he was going to make the overall opening day lineup, just because we're so healthy at second base and shortstop with Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, Matt Shaw. Those guys are going to be the go-to guys for that up the middle infield. We also pushed down Gavin Howell and Ethan Roberts. Now, you'll remember Ethan Roberts was a 2022 opening day roster, not the opening day pitcher, but on the pitching staff, and was actually flirting with the possibility of being in the 5-man rotation, but ended up falling off. He had some injuries, and then he left the organization, has come back to the organization, and he looked pretty good this season overall. When you look at his spring's training stats up to this point of being cut back down to AAA, he had a 1.5 ERA over 9 innings. So he wasn't getting starts. He was definitely getting mid-relief. But those mid-relief appearances that he was making with a 1.5 ERA. That's something to keep an eye on, and I definitely expect that if the Cubs bullpen takes some hits, and I'll talk about some of those possibilities when we talk who has made or who is potentially going to make the roster that he could fill in for. He's definitely very viable. So I could see him being a starter for AAA at Iowa, and just continuing to work on his ERA. But the Cubs might not want to do that to him. They might want to keep him in mid-relief and talk to the coach down at Iowa so that if the Cubs need him, he's definitely not going to be a starter for the Cubs, but definitely somebody to be a setup man or to pitch and eat up some innings in mid-relief, and hopefully, they don't overburden his ERA and make him look worse than what he is, because right now he's looking pretty good, which is was actually a good thing that I didn't expect him coming back and looking as good as he did. Projected setup men have been identified by Chris Counsell, so he's kind of letting some of the rabbits out of the hat for what we expect, but Hunter Harvey with a 1.8 ERA over 11 and 1/3 innings, also looking pretty good. So almost the same numbers as Ethan Roberts. Not quite as good as of a ERA, but he brings some different pitches to his repertoire. And something Counsell saw with Hunter Harvey must have been kind of the deciding factor. Phil Morton over 6-inning pitch with a 0 ERA. So he'll be looking as well as a projected sit-up man. Kind of surprising to me, these next couple of numbers, and then not really a surprise, and then another surprise. So the next two, Hobie Milner with a 3.3 ERA has looked okay. Is a kind of a bulky ERA, and I expect that was because a lot of the time he's eating up those 4th, 5th, 6th innings for the Cubs. He's sitting at 13.1, 13 and a third innings pitched with a 3.38, but I think he inherited quite a bit of runs, and that goes back to some of the starters have just not been where I projected him to be for the season. But he'll be in the Cubs bullpen. Here is the surprise and shock, and this comes back. Sometimes coaches just fall in love with players, and I cannot figure out why, even though the stats don't line up. It's just something, a gut instinct that they have, and it carries over to them getting a starting position or getting a roster spot. And so Theobar has been named into the Cubs bullpen with a 6.14 ERA, and he's just, again, not looked very good in my opinion. Nothing really impressive out of him at all this season. Counsell fell in love with him last season. He did eat up a lot of Cubs mid-relief innings and looked halfway decent, but then that was kind of the story of him in the first part of the season, and then was just absolutely atrocious by the end of the year. I mean, I'm talking with an ERA upwards of like 15 or 18, and he's come back this season. He's a roster invite back this season, but didn't really impress, but still got an opening day roster spot. So that was kind of interesting to me. That position right there with Theobar, I think that Counsell's probably going to flirt with him for 2 to 3 series of big league mid-relief pitching to see what he actually throws. And if he just continues to noodle arm stuff and give up runs, I fully expect him to bring up Ethan Roberts and replace, the 1.5 mid-relief thrower that has displayed, pretty decent pitching capability during spring training with Theobar, and send Theobar down. I'm kind of shocked that Theobar didn't just outright get cut with some of his performances, but he's on our mid-relief. Something about him Counsell loves. I don't know if it's pitching to left-handed batters. I don't know what it is. I can't name a stat that stands out to me other than the dude's got an over 6 ERA and he's on the roster, and he's the only one that has such an ERA for as far as the mid-relief goes. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, and I fully expect he's not going to last. He's not going to be, unless he comes out and is a completely different pitcher and looks like he did at the beginning of last season and just eats up mid-relief, 6-7 innings for the Cubs. I don't know how we keep him on when we've got an arm that can throw pretty decent and keep the ERA and those runners down. Colin Ray, they're looking at him as a long, what Council's calling a long mid-relief. So, he did make a bunch of spot starts. He came in last season as a reliever, having been a longtime starter for Milwaukee. Came in as a reliever to start the season, and then with the Cubs' rotation issues last season, ended up actually starting a majority of the season where he played was as a starting pitcher, and looked halfway decent. I mean, his ERA was in the threes. It wasn't terrible, and he looked halfway decent as a starter, and was on like kind of my projected fifth man or sixth man within the rotation, but. Council's projecting him to be a long relief, so starting pitcher comes in, just doesn't have it. Somebody to come in and take over in the third or the fourth kind of early and pitch, third inning, fourth inning, fifth inning, and then turn it over to, the guys that I've already spoken to that can eat up the sixth and seventh to get to a setup guy. I do like this season that we're seeing some of the structure to how Council is organizing his game, how he's already seen games going with the expectation that starters are gonna start. You're not gonna have short starters. You're not gonna have these 6 and 7 man starting rotations. He's got his 5 guys who he's projecting. He's got guys that in case of emergency, break glass for long start or long relief like Ray. He's setting up projected setup guys, and then that leads into Daniel Palencia. We go back to World Baseball Classic. Palencia, not the MVP of Team Venezuela, but definitely was like a contender for it and was striking out major league pitchers left and right and looked amazing. I mean, he was basically the second guy that should have been the MVP for Team Venezuela. It looked amazing, got those final outs. So against Team USA. Colin Ray, a happy surprise. I like where he's being positioned, and I like the strategy that Council is starting the season off with. One of the surprises that I don't agree with Council, but when you look at the actual strategy of the admin side of baseball, so not just the fact that, and we're going to talk about Javier Assad. Javier Assad pitched for Team Mexico and looked pretty good, like better than average, and helped them win one major game. Had kind of a bad game where he gave up a few runs, but his overall, if you calculate that into his spring training, Javier Assad with a 1.35 ERA, and that's a really good ERA. And we're starting him at AAA. We've already optioned him to AAA. Now, I was kind of shocked and taken back by this, but I read a few of the Cubs Twitter writers and sports writers, and the reason why that particularly is because the Cubs still have 2 years of minor league options on him, and so they're not bringing him on to the opening day roster, even with that great ERA, because they can option him to AAA. Keep him there, and he doesn't get full salary for the season as a starter. So that's the reason why. It's an admin money-saving move by the front office. Even though we have this awesome pitcher who just showed it in the World Baseball Classic on Team Mexico, they're kind of using his youth and the option to save money for the overall team. So I get that sometimes that is just the nature of the business. They're making a business move, not a baseball move on Javier Assad, but I don't expect him to be down at AAA very, very long. Just like Ethan Roberts, you got these guys with sub-2 ERAs that pitched a decent amount of innings, 10, 11, 12. You throw in World Baseball Classic, you're talking 13, 14, 15 innings, and their ERA is just absolutely spectacular. But in this case, because they have that option ability on him and it saves the club overall money, they're starting him at AAA. I don't expect him to be down there very long. I think after the first, in Assad's case versus Roberts' case, I think probably within the first 4, after the first 4 series, we'll probably see him moved up and injected into that mid-relief portion of the bullpen, where I actually think his strength is going to be is as a setup guy. But right now, Counsell's got his projected setup men. So he's got a strategy. We'll see how long he sticks to it. But I see Assad coming in for a 6th, 7th inning type of capability for that bullpen. Should those guys' numbers start to get pretty high. Another weird player that has been already named to projected mid relief is Ben Brown. Ben Brown, the Cubs expected a lot out of him when he came up. He had pretty decent numbers, and he pitched some difficult innings last season. But again, kind of not that impressive to me. He kind of falls into, better than Theobar, but still kind of like, why are we making this decision the way that we're making it right now? But Ben Brown with a 3.09 ERA, he had a decent amount of innings pitched so far in spring training, sitting at like 13 1/3, and so that's still pretty decent ERA for that amount of innings that he's pitched. I'm just still kind of shocked that he has already been projected to be. Counsell's already dropped the line that he's going to be projected to be in mid-relief. I think he needs some more work, and I think he's going to end up being a liability in 1 or 2 games, and they're going to have to reassess that decision. So another interesting thing is there, Counsell's been kind of close hold on opening day lineups, opening day rotation, opening day roster, but we do know that Moises Ballesteros has been named to opening day roster, so he's got his spot. He's going to most likely be the DH for the Cubs. He does offer some backup to first base, and he's a catcher. We're pretty deep at catcher right now when you look at Carson Kelly, who's had a really good hitting spring training, and then Miguel Amaya, who's also had a pretty decent spring training. So it's kind of hard to say we need a third catcher, but his overall numbers, with a .94 OPS and a batting average of .355 over spring training, he's hitting. I mean, he's mashing, and he's showing what he did at the end of the year. He brought back to the table this year, and so he's going to start on the opening day roster. I have no issue with that. We'll probably be looking at him as the starting DH on opening day. That's what I expect. And then some limited time for Michael Bush at first base, and then in extremis as a catcher, just because we have a healthy Carson Kelly and a healthy Miguel Amaya. I see those guys behind the plate for a majority of the season, a majority of the starts. We'll move over to Cubs pitching, and this is kind of the sad news story. Cubs pitching and the starting rotation has just not looked good. But when we talk opening day roster, Matthew Boyd, who pitched for Team USA, is going to be our opening day pitcher. Matthew Boyd sat with 9 1/3 innings in spring training, and then he got 4 additional innings with Team USA baseball. But in spring training, he had an 8.86 ERA, so that was not good. He did pitch pretty decently in World Baseball Classic, but when you look at the overall computation, you add in those innings, he still sits at an over 6 ERA. And so saying your opening day ace is Matthew Boyd with an over 6 ERA, it just doesn't sit well with me. Again, the numbers can only speak so much, and Counsell sees it, a different way. Although Counsell's kind of a sabermetrics guy, he does a lot of, left-hand pitcher, right-hand batter, and vice versa type of substitutions during the game. It was just kind of interesting to me that Boyd's getting the ball on game 1, but he must have liked what he saw during World Baseball Classic. Boyd might get one more start this next week just to kind of shore up. It won't be a long start since he's our opening day, but he might get one more time with the ball between now and the start of the actual season. As I said, Colin Ray, who is not a starter but a very possible 6-man starter, I mean, he's sitting right now with 20 and 1/3 innings pitched. So he is the most innings pitched of any of the Cubs right now on the roster, and he's got a 3.1 ERA, which is really, really solid with 20, having the most innings pitched. And again, because he didn't start games, a lot of those runs were actually inherited from the Cubs starters and just where the game was at. So those earned runs would have gone to the starting pitcher, but in this case, it would have been like walking a guy or getting a guy on base, and then giving runs up. Problem continues to be in the liability that I see with our 5-man rotation. This is how it's going to sit. It's Matthew Boyd, Cade Horton, Edward Cabrera, Shota Imanaga, and James Taillon as our 5th guy. James Taillon he's the liability starter, which I think if there ends up being a starter substitution, it's going to end up being Ray into Taillon's spot. But Taillon has gone 0-5 on the season in spring training after his 5th start. And so that's not good. And he sits with only 13 and 1/3 innings pitched. He's got the most starts of any Cubs pitcher going through spring training World Baseball Classic. And he sits with a 17.55 ERA right now, which is just absolutely atrocious for a starting rotation pitcher being named and going into the season. Imanaga has 13 innings pitched with a 4.85 ERA. Not great, although he is 2-0 in his starts. And then Edward Cabrera with 11 and 1/3 innings pitched with a 6.35 ERA. Now it's interesting because Cabrera looked pretty decent during the beginning of spring training. He was a late starter and then went to World Baseball Classic, looked very decent during World Baseball Classic, but he did have one bad game where he kind of ran up the score, allowed the score to get ran up on him, and then came back and pitched. He just pitched this last week and gave up 4 hits in 3 innings and 4 runs. And so that drove his ERA up quite a bit just in that one bad start that he's had. And so based on what I saw in Cubs spring training, World Baseball Classic, and then back to Cubs spring training, Edward Cabrera, he was our big offseason starting pitcher signing from Miami. He looks that he will have, 2 to 3 great games and then just have one absolute dumper of a game where he basically gives the game away in the first inning. And so that kind of becomes a later season liability if you can't figure that business out. But when you look at, he did that during Cubs spring training. He did that during World Baseball Classic. He came back to the Cubs and had his kind of bad game with the Cubs, drove his ERA up. I mean, his ERA would probably be sitting around 3. Well, it'd be over 3, but it'd be like 3.3 if he hadn't had that terrible last outing. So it's interesting, going to be something to watch. But that was our big offseason move for the starting rotation, and we can say only so much about spring training, and then this year you have the weirdness of having World Baseball Classic in there, but I'm just not. I don't have the warm and fuzzy of having just dropped a huge amount of money on this guy and him sitting with an over 6 ERA going into the season. Cade Horton with 10 and 2/3 inning with a 5.91 ERA. So when we look at the actual ERAs of the Cubs rotation right now, Matthew Boyd with a 8.68, Cade Horton with a 5.91, Edwin Cabrera with a 6.35, Imanaga with a 4.85, and Taillon with a 17.55. Puts the Cubs' average ERA for a starter at over 10. I don't like those numbers. I don't like those numbers at all. But again, it's spring training. I can only say what the numbers are, they're telling me. But season starts next week, and so if some of these numbers are indicative of how they're going to start games, the Cubs are going to be behind. They're going to be giving up 3 or 4 runs in the first 4 or 5 innings. And if the Cubs offense can't produce and they go cold, which they have shown that they are doing during spring training, then we're going to be sitting kind of in a bad spot to start the season off with. So That's kind of what those numbers are telling me. When we look now and talk the Cubs' regular starting positions, the Cubs sit with a spring training record overall of 12-16. We're going to use I've used this format before: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good, Carson Kelly with a 1.1 OPS. He's batting over 400. Good. Amaya and Ballesteros batting over 350. They're looking good. So all of our catchers are hitting, which is good. Kind of a good news story, but Dylan Carlson, who we got from, I believe his last team that he played for was the Indians, but he had gone, DFA from the Cardinals. Yankees picked him up for like half a season, and then went to the Guardians last season, and then kind of floundered with the Guardians, and then made it to the Cubs. He's definitely going to be on opening day roster. He is batting .333 with a .97 ERA, not ERA, but OPS. And his glove has looked good in the outfield. Now that's going to be important because now we'll scoot back to World Baseball Classic and the update for Seiya Suzuki. So Seiya Suzuki got injured during Team Japan's big game. Team Japan ends up losing that game. Suzuki gets caught stealing and hurts his knee. There wasn't a huge amount of news on it up until this week, and the story that's being told right now is a right PCL strain. He's not going to be on the opening day roster. He's on the team, obviously. He had been smashing for Team USA, or not Team USA, Team Japan, and the Cubs. So his OPS was high, his batting average was high, and then he got hurt. So they haven't put out, I haven't seen anything official on how long he is going to be sat. It's probably going to be one of those with a strain where when he thinks he's ready to start, he'll start. So I don't expect to see him actually in the first series. He'll probably make some light batting shows as DH in the second and third series, and then I expect him to be back playing by the fourth series in the outfield, in right field. That is, of course, as long as he doesn't aggravate the injury and his rehab continues to go well. But what that does is it leaves us a hole in right field that really are only two position players that can swap out and be of any substance as Matt Shaw. Shaw going to be starting on the bench. I just don't see him starting in the outfield, although he did play outfield last season and third base. I just don't see him being the guy that starts right field. But I do see Dylan Carlson starting in right field on opening day. Now, again, that hasn't been announced, but based on his numbers in spring training, based on the need right now with Suzuki being out, that's where I see him, and he's batting well enough that he can absolutely do it. Now, the other option that hasn't been named yet to the actual opening day roster is Jonathan Long. Jonathan Long also batting over 300 with almost a 1,000 on base percentage and is a natural outfielder. He might get named to the opening day roster and actually start in right field for the Cubs. And this would only be because Suzuki is injured and then be sent back down, optioned back to Iowa. So he might just be an injury start right now because of the need. And then we keep Carlson to back up, who I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And we'll see where we sit there. So that right field position, I'm going to give it to Carlson, just going in with my gut. But I also think if it's not Carlson, then it's going to be Jonathan Long. The bad. So right now, first base is looking kind of paltry when it comes to hitting. So Michael Busch is hitting at .244, not great, and Conforto in left field is only hitting .213, and so Conforto has the experience, so he might be the default. Push the left fielder over to right field and let him eat up those starts that Seiya Suzuki won't be able to get to. But I think Carlson is the better defender, and he's got a better batting average right now. So I think it might be a misstep to substitute, immediately to start Conforto over to right field when he hasn't been hitting as well, and he's not doesn't have as good a glove, in my opinion, as Carlson at the moment. But that might be what happens. I think when we look at the starts and the kind of the swing and the to and fro of spring training, that may be what happens. I'll have to wait and see. But what that would do though is give Conforto, go ahead and let him do the start, and then bring Dylan Carlson in mid game to substitute when you need to have better defenders in the outfield. But right now, because Carlson's hitting better and he's got better on-base percentage and just looked way better in spring training than Conforto, I still got to give it to Carlson. So we'll see what happens with all that. But Conforto, did not look great during spring training, in my opinion. And the ugly, Ian Happ. Oh boy. So Ian Happ sitting with a .188 overall batting average and a .62 OPS for all of spring training. So he continued to struggle all of spring training. Just could not find his at bats, see the ball well. He just wasn't hitting, and he can hit from either side of the plate. So neither side was working for him. He's going to be an opening day starter, and he's going to be a liability when it comes to at-bats. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, again, like I just spoke to, we've got Carlson sitting on the bench with a better ERA and can fill in left field, and we've got Conforto, but we're also short a right fielder. So one of those two are going to be in right field, and if you need more at-bats, you need to eat up some of the at-bats because Happ is just not hitting. Also, one of those two could come in. Now, granted, Conforto, not that much better, but better when you look at the metrics, to come in and substitute for Happ. So we'll see how Council ends up playing that, but I definitely don't see Happ not starting on opening day or starting period in any of these series. I think it's going to end up being offensive adjustments mid-game when we see some of that. And that is going to wrap it up. That was a lot of in-depth Cubs action. So, we're getting closer to the season. We're getting closer to when the games actually count. But that's what the numbers are saying to me right now. As always, if you liked this content, subscribe, leave a comment, help the algorithm, follow Buzz Sports Media, and check out some of our other shows with some different various content on football, basketball, college basketball, in-depth take from the female perspective with shenanigans, mixed martial arts, WWE. All those sports can be covered with some of our sister and brother content creators. And as always, go IU.